Testing 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2. Check, check.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Committee meeting for the 23rd of April. Is it our 52nd meeting for this term of Council? If you wish to speak to the committee with respect to any of the items that are on our agenda this morning, if you'd fill in a white request to speak form, if you haven't registered in advance, and bring it to the committee assistant to my closest right, and we'll make sure you get on the agenda to speak to any of the items that are on to today's agenda. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 3 and 4 on today's agenda. For those items listed above, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Municipal Board. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Municipal Board if Council does not adopt an amendment within 120 days of receipt of an application for zoning and 180 days for an official plan amendment. Une feuille de commentaires est disponible à l'entrée pour toute personne désirant soumettre des commentaires écrits concernant les modifications. So if there is a comment sheet at the door for anyone wishing to submit written comments on these amendments. So, members of committee, are there any declarations of interest? None? Confirmation of minutes. Minutes 51, April 9th, 2013. We have a minor change that we have to amend the minutes. So we've been advised that in crafting a resolution, we left out the word draft with respect to item number, I forget when it was, minutes March 50, minutes March 51, inadvertent omission of draft in motions pertaining to the Building a Livable Ottawa comprehensive 5-year review of the official plan. If you recall, Councillor Harder asked that we receive the draft update to both the Hemson report and the employment land study. We neglected in the minutes to include the word draft. So if we could carry the amendment to the minutes. Okay, and are they carried as amended? Carried. Okay. Item number 1 is, we'll go through a consent agenda to see if we can get through some of these items. Item number 1 is the Treasurer's Statement on Development Charge Reserve Funds for 2012. I don't have anyone registered to speak to the committee with respect to that item. Is there anyone in the audience who should just speak to the committee with respect to item number 1? Members of the committee, we do have a technical amendment that has to change revise some of the pages. The numbers changed a little bit. So, and maybe you can tell us, Ms. Similak, what actually changed.
Certainly, Chair. The only item that actually changed was the amount in the public transit program this is on document 1 of the report. Under the column called Unapplied Capital Project Funding Debt Requirements, we, unfortunately, because the light rail project was actually approved so late in 2012, it wasn't caught when we did this, so we've added the additional development charges that were approved for the Confederation line into the document. So that moves you from a commitment of $18 million to a commitment of $65 million. That is the only change in the document.
Okay. Members of the committee, are there any questions on that? Is that change carried? Carried. On the item then, as amended, is it carried? Carried. Okay. Item number 2 is an application to alter the former Ottawa East Town Hall, 61 Main Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I have no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to item number 2. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 2? No. Members of committee, is this item carried? Carried. Okay. Item number 3 is the zoning at 201 and 221 City Place. We do have Mr. Rothwell here to speak, who's in agreement, but Councillor Eglai wants to hold it and come back to it, so we will hold it and come back to it. Item number 4 is the zoning at 193 and 200 Lees Avenue. I have no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to the zoning at 193 and 200 Lees Avenue? Okay, members of the committee, we have a technical amendment that cleans up some of the language with respect to the parking and how it's to be applied. And we do have a request from the LRT office to move this to council tomorrow so that we can get on with the relocation for the University of Ottawa and accommodate the construction of the Confederation line. So, members of the committee, is the amendment, Mr. Schmidt, would it be you?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
The amendment just provides clarity with respect to what the University of Ottawa can develop on their lands. That's correct?
That's correct.
Right. So that in doing this, we're not restricting their ability to meet their educational
program.
Needs.
That's right.
Right. Okay. So on the technical amendment, is that carried? On the item, is that carried? Carried. And on the request to waive it to council, is that carried? Carried. Okay. Item number 5, we have 2 speakers, Bob Rocklebank and Gary Seeley, and that's the year-end report. So we'll hold that one and come back to it. We'll hold item number 6 as well, because I think the staff want to make a presentation, and we're going to hold item number 7. So we can go back to item number 3, 193 and 200 Lees Avenue. Councillor Eglai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm certainly aware of this report as the work is in my ward, and in theory, I don't have a difficulty with the application. My concern more has to do with some of the public comments raised, and that have also been raised with my office. And I appreciate staff's responses to them. And the only one that I would like to have some more information on is number 1, and that is the fact that there's still outstanding work remaining from previous phases of the City Place development through Ashcroft, and there's a certain level of frustration, I guess, amongst certain of my residents about that particular situation, and I'd like you to give me a bit more detail. You do respond in the report briefly, but I'd like to know and be able to pass on to my residents what strategy we have in place to address that situation going forward. You know, you say there's a plan, or that you're aware of the concerns and you're working towards appropriate resolutions. So what's the strategy, and what are those potential resolutions?
Mr. Chair, every year we, with the advent of spring and the snow melt, there's always exposure of new construction materials and so forth. And every year our inspection group will review the issues pertaining to any outstanding issues for any site plans or any other issues or that deal with that site. So we're pursuing that right now with the applicant to try to resolve some of these outstanding issues.
And can you give me a sense of a timeline on that?
We intend to meet with the applicant within the next few weeks to summarize all those issues, and we'll keep the councillor abreast of it, and then have a strategy in place within the next few weeks.
Okay, so offline you'll keep me apprised of the results of that meeting and what steps you're looking to take going forward?
We will.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Rothwell, you registered to speak. Do you need to speak to the committee, or do you want to speak to the committee? Okay. Other than that, members of the committee, do we have any questions? Okay. On the item, then, is it carried? Carried. Okay. Thank you very much. Item number 5, and maybe we can, what we'll do for item 5 and 6, we'll take them together because they are the end of one year and roll them into the end of the next year. So we have two presentations. We'll go through the presentations. We'll hear from Mr. Brocklebank and Mr. Seeley, and we can move forward on discussion on both points. So, you ready? Yeah, you can do that. Ms. Schenk, are you doing the first presentation?
I am.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Human. Good morning. My name is Peggy Schenk. I'm the Acting Manager of the Business Services Branch in the Department of Planning and Growth Management, and I'm here to talk to you this morning about the Planning and Growth Management 2012 Year-End Report. This report provides a synopsis of development application and non-building code permit activity within the department in the last year. It includes information about permits and applications ranging from planning applications to pool permits, from the reimbursement program to sign minor variances. Owing to the variety of activities covered in the report, I've just selected some highlights to review this morning. It is noted that the legislated Building Code Services Annual Report came to Planning Committee at the April 9th meeting. Thank you. This first slide shows the number of planning applications that were processed by the department in 2012. 572 applications reached a decision, representing an almost 14% increase over the number of applications processed the year before. This next slide shows the number of development applications that were processed under delegated authority in 2012 compared to previous years. Some of these applications delegated to staff include standard plan of condominium, lifting part lot control, lifting of holding zones, lifting of 30-centimeter reserves, and demolition control, fall under the new Guaranteed Application Timelines initiatives that was implemented on July 1st of 2012. The good news is since that time, only 3 applications have missed their target out of 111 considered in that category. Other applications with authority delegated to staff include site plan control, plan of subdivision, cash in lieu of parking, road opening enclosures, and lifting of interim control. More than half of the applications approved through delegation of authority were site plan control applications. Thank you. Site plan applications with authority delegated to the manager and requiring public consultation showed a decline in meeting the targeted timelines from 34% in 2011 to 19% in 2012. Site plans in this category have a greater chance of not meeting their timelines due to the complexity of the application, the level of interest in the community, and the desire to resolve issues identified through notification and consultation process. The department's intent in these applications is focused on resolving issues and attempting to achieve consensus. These applications have shown a decline in achieving their timelines over the last 5 years. While the department has made concerted efforts to impact culture, change procedures, and improve timelines, the reality is that issues are more complex, sites are more difficult, and often require negotiated solutions to reach consensus between the applicant and the community. This view is supported by a sampling of the applications that indicate that the majority of additional processing time falls into the issue resolution phase of the process. So this suggests the time has come to re-examine or tune up the site plan control timelines to reflect the changes that have occurred in the last 13 years. Accordingly, the department will undertake such a review and return to committee with recommendations for consideration. It should also be noted that the timelines for the less complex site plan applications without public consultation show an improvement by meeting their timelines 59% of the time, which is up from 51% in the prior year.
Yes.
The majority of non-delegated planning applications considered by committee and council are zoning bylaw amendment applications, totaling 97 out of the 120 processed last year. The departmental goal is to process these applications on or before the targeted timeline 80% of the time. 59% of these applications met the targeted timelines, and a further 20% were processed within 30 days of the target. which accounts for 81% of all applications received, and makes allowance for the variability of committee meeting dates and for the scheduling of reports. Heritage activities. 21 heritage applications were dealt with by committee and council in 2012, and these fall into alterations to individually designated heritage buildings under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and alterations, demolitions, or new construction in heritage conservation districts designated under Part 5 of the Act. There were also 2 heritage designations of individual properties under Part 4 of the Act approved by Council. 36 matching heritage grants were approved, totaling $150,000, and a guide to preparing cultural heritage impact statements was approved by Committee and Council. Construction-related encroachments have increased over the last few years from 1,786 in 2009 to 2,703 in 2012, generated revenues of $2.8 million last year. I've included a summary of some of the non-building code related applications on this slide, and it's interesting to note that pool enclosure permits are a function of the weather. Last summer arrived early and was quite hot, and so there was an increase in pool enclosure permits from 813 in 2011 to 883 in 2012. Permanent signs on private property permits include signs such as wall signs, projecting, canopy, development, billboard, and street signs. And while there were 518 applications received, that covered just over 1,000 individual signs. There was also an increase in compliance reports from 642 in 2011, and that is a function of changes in the categories and fee types, and an increase in refinancing of residential and commercial properties which require these reports. That was the highlights of the report, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
And Mr. Moser, maybe I spoke too soon in trying to put these together. I think in retrospect, since yours is a more policy directed report, we'll keep them separate. We'll speak to them separately. In my desire to be as efficient as possible, merging those seemed like a good idea when I said it, but in retrospect, after hearing Ms. Schenk, it's probably not the best way to handle this. So if you could just sit tight, that would be great. So are there any questions for Ms. Schenk? Go ahead, Councillor Godry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just coming back to the slide, your last slide on the pool permits, how much do you feel the number of those permits had increased because of the bylaw that we were talking about the pool enclosure bylaw?
I'll defer that to Ms. Gregoire.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, very little, because it's a factor. You know, your decision of contracting with an installer and purchasing of a pool is more an economic decision as opposed to timing. And our proposal to increase the fee only came following or in tandem with the inquest. So by then the season had been over. So this reflects permits that would have been pulled up to about October of last year. So there's been no impact. And this year, we don't know if it's going to have an impact or not. We will see as the season progresses.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Gregoire? Sorry, Ms. Gregoire and Ms. Schenk? No? Okay, let's... Mr. Brocklebank, if you'd like to come up. Go ahead.
As noted, the Federation of Citizens Associations received a copy of this report. Thank you. We have not had an opportunity to pull together an FCA submission, but I have some personal remarks. It is good to see the report. Together with Council's debate of it, this can be a good start in making this city activity better understood. but I think parts of the report could be clarified. First, this seems to reflect only part of the activity of the Planning and Growth Management Department. We, outsiders, tend to divide the department into two: development approvals and planning policy. The report fails to account for work on the many guidelines for development, or community design plans, or review of the official plan and other master planning documents. Second, I can't get the numbers to add up. I've explained this at length in my written submission. 89 applications were processed which were neither delegated nor non-delegated. How is that possible? Similarly, there are figures for various procedures, and it is not clear which are included or excluded from totals. No doubt there are problems of counting. A zoning bylaw amendment could be related to to a site plan approval, but greater clarity would be helpful. Third, important issues about land use planning do not appear in the year-end report. To identify those issues, consider matters which were discussed in council debate on April the 10th. Would it not be useful to know how many pre-consultation meetings are held, and to have some sense of how many lead to actual proposals? Could we learn how many applications before the Committee of Adjustment attracted comment from the Planning Department? What of official plan amendments? Surely they are of considerable importance and should be counted. Their significance was underscored in the council discussion in which planning context was mentioned. Fourth, how does the activity described in the report relate to the city budget? The 2013 estimates show the Planning and Growth Management Department, including Building Code Services, as a moneymaker for the city. The more applications processed, the more the city makes. Does this create the right kind of incentive for the Planning Department? It suggests that the longer the official plan and the zoning bylaws can be maintained in contradiction, the more cash this department hauls in. Do you want growth management to be a growth industry? If you bring the various planning documents into harmony, are you slaughtering the goose that lays the golden eggs? And fifth, you are presented with many numbers, but the report does not provide much guidance to interpret the numbers. If applications went to 0, that would probably be a bad sign. But do you want to see bigger or smaller figures presented in these reports? Bigger figures could be indicative of a booming city, or of one frustrated by bureaucratic obstacles. Smaller figures could indicate economic stagnation, or well-planned growth of benefit to us all. So in summary, it is good to have the report, but do we know what is being reported? How do the figures relate to each other? Are meaningful things missing? Are we encouraging more processing? And how should we interpret all the numbers? Thank you.
Well, do you want to, this sparked my consider, do you want to offer any points of discussion, Ms. Schenk?
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't mind saying a few things. In terms of, as you mentioned earlier, the policy part of the department we'll be discussing in the next report on the annual work program. So we have traditionally separated the day-to-day from the policy, and so we are reporting on all the policy initiatives in the next report. The only other comment I'd like to make in terms of the revenue, I mean, the revenue, yes, the department had a small surplus in 2012. That related wholly to the increase in the encroachment fees that we got. A lot of development brings in a lot of encroachment fees. In terms of the planning, our aim is to try to be as much as we can self-sufficient. Building is self-sufficient, but planning, traditionally we're in the 65, 70%. So our applications in planning area isn't what's driving our revenue. It is the encroachments.
Okay. Michelle, did you want to add anything up about the...
I just want to say thank you to Mr. Brocklebank for bringing forward those suggestions. The report, we will look at the report for next year and take those ideas into consideration. Okay. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Gary Seeley, if you'd like to come up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I begin my remarks, I'd like to say thank you to the planners and staff of the Planning and Growth Management Department, whose work is very much appreciated. And my comments are, again, to try to understand the meaning of the report. The report treats mainly the rapidity and the volume of planning and related applications. So it deals with efficiency. So what about effectiveness? What are the results of the work? And aren't these just as important, and shouldn't they be included in the report? How do you judge the outcomes unless there's some presentation of the material in terms of outcomes? And I think that the basis of measurement of outcomes is the provincial policy statement. The city's official plan, which is under review, is the main way of executing this provincial direction. And the official plan, all 64 pages of it, is the policy instrument for achieving what is required by the provincial policy statement. So is the department making real achievements, or is it just busy? And may I suggest that, at the very least, an annual report of the department should address intensification. What is successful in the eyes of the clientele, the citizen groups, and the public at large? And what can we assume from the many public appeals, protests, critical newspaper articles? And Ottawa is not equal in all its parts, may I suggest. How does intensification fare for the various parts of the city, and how do these add up? The satellite cities. For example, the satellite cities, Mr. Chair, outside the Greenbelt, the villages, and the downtown areas. What is the impact of this work on the communities in those areas? And as well, we're enjoined by the provincial policy statement to provide for affordable housing. What is the department doing about this issue? For instance, are poor people to be provided housing near the transportation-oriented development so they can economically get to work? Has the department improved well-being and wellness? In terms of natural and infrastructural systems, also directed by the provincial policy statement, are we approaching limits to intensification? And are we ending with sprawl? And given what nearly everybody knows or expects from the continuing effects of global change, how is the department thinking globally and acting locally in that framework? Finally, Mr. Chair, in terms of public consultation on the vision and the execution of the plan, of course the department must have due regard to the rights of private development. But it's also entrusted with projecting a beautiful and well-functioning city of communities. Does it have the resources, including public trust, to fulfill its mandate? Is it strengthening communities? That's my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hubley had a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Seeley, can you identify what this term you just used, satellite cities, what do you mean by that? And where does it come from?
Well, it comes from the Graber Report, which set the pattern of development for the city in the middle 50s. It established the green plan, or the green belt, and it gave direction for the creation of cities outside the green belt, including Orleans, Canada, Barhaven. We can see those expressions today, Barhaven. So those cities each have a residential sector, at the center of which is an intended town center, and encircled by which are employment lands. They're not like the suburbs. They're not suburbs. They are satellite cities. Of course, they've been amalgamated by the RMOC and eventually the amalgamated city of Ottawa. But they're very different from the former rural villages, and they're very different from the area inside the green belt.
Okay, but in our official plan or any of our planning reports or documents, you don't see that term used anywhere.
I agree with you, and I think that's a deficiency in the official plan, and I would urge the Planning Committee to give that some deep thought. Barhaven is not like the area inside the Greenbelt. Canada is not like Centertown. It doesn't have the same conditions. And Orleans is crying out for more attention to its employment lands, as we know. So there is an issue here which the Planning Committee needs to come to grips with.
But you can see where confusion could be created when we start introducing terms that aren't found in the provincial policy statement or any of the documents that the city uses.
I agree with you.
We're an amalgamated city now. We've kind of grown up from those days, and I don't think we really want to go, at least my sense from around the table is we're not looking at going back to that report, that we're looking to the future and trying to plan for the future.
I agree with you that there could be confusion. And in this case, when we look through the official plan review document, such as it is now, it's descriptive rather than prescriptive. It's not finalized yet. We see reference to the developments outside the green belts. We see also a schedule, a very specific schedule of the rural villages, the former rural villages. But we don't, the language is missing for what is Canada, Orleans, and Barhaven. And we need that kind of language to avoid confusion.
So maybe that's a better discussion for part of the official plan review rather than the report of the activities of the planning department for last year.
Well, I think it would be a good idea for planners to be able to articulate their work in a way which is easily understandable, and that's the thrust of my remarks, in terms of the strategic level, so that the Planning Committee, which can't be expert in everything, can see how the vast work, important work of the Planning Department adds up into the vision of the city, which was set by Graber, and is largely still there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for bringing this up. Staff in the room and Councillor Kadri and Councillor Human, I know that it's at least 3.5 years ago that Councillor Kadri and I called something Suburban Lens Group. And out of our Intensification Implementation Working Group, IIWG, which we also have, which also now includes Councillor Hobbs, we continue to work on just that, the suburban lens, because it hasn't been recognized as different, and yet we know that it's vastly different. And so actually, so that you know, I'll give you an example of one thing. In Barhaven, for example, we have a lot of Leda clay, so we're not able to plant trees. So we have communities that are building with no trees. 18 townhouses with a conifer on either end of the 18, and that's it. And that's not acceptable. That's not the way to build community. So that's something that we're working on. But yesterday we had a meeting, and Councillor Hubley was there, and Councillor Kadri, Councillor Blois, Councillor Manette, myself, and I think that's it. Oh, Councillor Wilkinson. We were there. We were talking about parking, about laneways on our front yards. Why is that different? Because we aren't transit dependent. We are very much car dependent, and we need to have some space. So you know, we are working on that. So what you're talking about is actually behind the scenes going on as we look at, well, that doesn't make sense. And you know with the official plan, because you're involved with that sponsor group, that we've added the look at suburban, which was not there in the first draft, right? We had rural and we had urban. And what you're saying is right, suburban is not urban. And there are differences. So we are trying to isolate those differences and look at it that way and hope to come with that conclusion during this official plan process. So thanks very much for the opportunity to say that today.
And, Mr. Chair, just to be clear, I think that those 3 satellite cities are very important. In a way, they're unlike other suburban lands because they're town centers.
Yeah, and you should know that you could add Riverside South to that. So we will completely, and Stittsville, yeah, because we all have town centers and we all have employment areas that we want to develop. And they truly will be the game changers, and we will actually be the cities outside of the city when that happens.
The cities outside the city. Mm-hmm. There's a term perhaps Councillor Hubley would find useful as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Mr. Seeley? Nope. Thank you very much, Mr. Seeley, for your presentation. So, if we can go back to the report. And the recommendation, which is to receive this report for information. Can we receive it? Received? Okay. Perfect. If we can go now to item number 6, which is the revised Planning and Growth Management Department Term of Council Work Plan. So, Mr. Moser, that's you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My presentation today will provide committee with an update on the department's term of council work plan. Committee members may recall the work plan was approved in 2011 following an off-site session with committee and has served since then to scope staff's individual work programs, the department's budget submissions, as well as to inform council's strategic plan. As was mentioned earlier, these projects that we're talking about today really are coming from our policy area, both within the Ms. Sneddon's group and within the Ms. Gregoire's groups. So it isn't representative of the other operations of the department. The department has 5 priorities for this term of council, 4 of which are primarily under the purview of Planning Committee. The first one is advancing the transportation agenda to connect transportation systems to our neighborhoods. This includes all the planning studies being undertaken with an aim of maximizing economic development and neighborhood connectivity with the along the Confederation Line light rail system. And as committee knows, we've undertaken 3 of these already and working on 3 this year. The second priority is service excellence to our clients. Refers to the initiatives that will remove bureaucratic and internal barriers to the development review process, and will most importantly promote a culture of measured risk, empowerment, and customer service. The importance of this initiative was underscored in 2012 and 2013 budgets, where Council provided additional funding to the Department for culture and change management expertise, and we've certainly taken advantage of that in terms of moving forward our culture within the development review area. The third priority, bringing certainty to the design priority areas, refers to the planning exercises being undertaken with the aim of providing certainty as to where residential intensification will be encouraged. The fourth priority, sustainable planning, houses several initiatives that have the goal of promoting sustainability in the development review process and supports green infrastructure projects. Many of these relate to our stormwater facilities that we are working on. And the final, the fifth priority, is the rural agenda. Contains all the projects and policy efforts being undertaken in the rural area over the course of this term of council, and most of those initiatives are taken to Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee, other than the official plan that we're working on citywide. Before I get into this year's work program, just a little summary of what we accomplished together in 2012. There's a long list of things that we did do, including the completion of our first of the 3 transit-oriented development plans. We did revise our infill guidelines. We developed our Made in Ottawa Section 37 policy. We were able to bring forward a policy on digital signs, a policy regarding the prohibition, inspection, and mediation of buildings used for marijuana growth operations, and the development of a new Parks and Open Space Manual, which certainly has been well received by our clients. Our 2013 work program is ambitious, but in our opinion is achievable. Our 2 primary objectives this year will be the continuous improvement of the development review process and the completion of a refresh of our major plans. Official plan, Transportation Master Plan, Infrastructure Master Plan, the cycling and pedestrian plans, as well as starting to lay the groundwork for the development charges bylaw that has to be approved. A new one has to be approved by June of 2014. However, we have updated the work plan to include new projects following committee direction, outcomes from the planning summit, and a thorough review of available staff capacity, because we are trying to be able to, if we make a commitment to a plan or a project, we want to ensure that we can accomplish it. So we've been, and committee has certainly been supportive of us being able to stick to the program that we've laid out. The following slides illustrate the major initiatives we will be either commencing or completing in 2013. I won't go through them all, but many of them do respond to council direction. One of them was undertaking the second phase of the infill study. We'll be doing that. We're going to review the Section 37 policy. It's been in place now for a year. We were asked to bring back a report this year on that, on how it's going, what improvements we want to make. Also be bringing forward the byward market visioning exercise. You'll also see priorities in the suburban area, including the development of new subdivision design standards and the expansion of on-street parking, or examination of on-street parking. And as Councillor Harder has mentioned, we have a suite of initiatives that we are doing with respect to looking at the suburban lens in how we move forward with development. As I mentioned, we'll also be continuing with 3 more transit development plans. We're in the midst of doing a community design plan for the Stittsville Main Street. We're going to initiate this year the Mer Bleu mixed-use center. It's been on our work program for the last 2 years, awaiting a commitment for funding. That's now been received, so we'll be moving forward with that. And we'll also be completing the East Urban Community CDP. As well as we'll be undertaking planning studies that were announced at the Planning Summit with the additional resources that were provided by committee and council. And we've started the CDP on Scott Street, and we're looking at the core of Vanier. We'll also be undertaking planning studies required to facilitate the entry of the lands brought into the urban boundary through OPA 76. There were a number of new lands brought into the urban boundary, and on a cooperative basis with the property owners, we'll be moving forward with that planning, with there being a commitment to provide resources for the department to be able to oversee these plans, with the proponents doing the funding for all of the studies that will be required. We'll also be reviewing this year the suburban and rural areas
regarding billboard signage. It was something that came forward from committee out of the discussion on the digital signs. In the heritage area, we'll be updating the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation Plan and the new Edinburgh Heritage Conservation Plan, among other things that we are doing in the heritage area. And we'll be bringing forward a review of the cash in lieu of parking policy, something that's been on the books for a number of years, and we're determined to finish it this year. And we'll also be looking at the revised site plan control bylaw. So, Mr. Chair, I've just sort of given an overview of the major activities from 2012 and 2013, and just wanted to note that in the report there are the list of activities for 2014. I didn't go through them in any detail, but they, in many cases, there will be a completion of the project that we're doing in 2013 will be shown being completed in 2014. So I'd be more than pleased to answer any questions the committee may have.
Mr. Moser, one of the things that I was curious about was where I would find the updating or the heritage review of the Golden Triangle. We had been, as you know, we approved we've sent the CDP to council. It's coming next
month.
And one of the outcomes was to refresh some or one of the recommendations was to refresh some of that heritage work. And I know you have a full plate in the heritage side, but if council in its next budget were to allocate you more resources, would you be able to carry out that work or advance it from when it's scheduled now?
Mr. Chair, it is scheduled in 2014. It's in, if you look at, I guess it would be document 2, it is listed as a study that we're going to undertake beginning in 2014. It will require some funding. Most of the heritage studies do require some consultant help, so that would be part of our ask for the 2014 budget.
Okay, so it actually says that the date forecasted is 2015.
To be finished, I think.
To be finished, okay. So in order to have it undertaken in this year, we're going to have to make sure that there is an allocation of funding to be able to move that ahead in the heritage field.
For the 2014 budget, yes, Mr. Chair.
Right, okay. And could you, between now and then, I know that that's a long time away, could you provide me with, and Councillor Harder as chair of our Built Heritage Subcommittee, what it would require to advance that agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blois, you had some questions.
And probably not surprisingly, it deals with the Mayor Bleu Mixed Use Center Community Design Plan. And I think what I'm reading in the report may be a little different than what you just presented, because as you indicated, it's about 2 years ago this was identified as being required, and I thought it was already being done as we speak, but that's not what you're telling us.
No, Mr. Chair, we in the previous work plans we also showed it as pending I think the words we had were pending a
financial.
Yeah, exactly. Words to that effect, right, or cost sharing or something like that. So we finally reached an agreement with the owners of that. They've agreed to fund the project moving forward, and so we're just waiting to finalize the paperwork on that, and we'll be moving forward with it.
So is that funding in place now, or?
It will be.
It will be?
Because we've been provided by the proponent in terms of moving forward.
Right. I mean, this actually affects, employment lands and everything else out there. So if we actually ever do move forward until this is completed, so what are you looking at as the completion timelines?
Well, most of these it tends to take around 18 months. We're probably looking to finish it in mid to late next year.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, are there any other questions for Mr. Moser? Yes. Well, Councillor, why don't you say that?
Well, I just think that it's a very aggressive agenda, and I think that we will be serving the residents and businesses of our city really well we accomplish all of that this year. I think that it's achievable because we have a different climate around council, and we have I think a different climate in the city of what the people, their level of involvement. They're interested in participating in different ways, Mr. Chair. We saw that through the official plan, building a livable community, a city. The fact that we went from a previous record of 700 and some participants via our website to 8,500. So I think that I think it's going to be a very big year for Ottawa and a good one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there anybody else on this? I think, members of committee, if you, Councillor Hart has said it quite correctly, we have a very aggressive agenda, and the reason that we're able to, and the reason we have been able to achieve that is that once we've set that agenda, we've been very clear about the department aligning the resources to achieve that agenda. Then once we approve our plan, we don't come back 2 months later and say, oh, by the way, we have another priority, and an unfunded priority, and we jam it in. When there has been issues that have arisen, that we've had to adjust the work plan, accompanying that request to change has always been a request for the appropriate resources with which to achieve those objectives. And you know, with all due respect to us around the table, that was a discipline that was intermittent at best in previous work plans. There was always the attempt, we can just do more, we'll just put it in, and in the end we often achieved less, or less than we were unable to meet the community's expectations. But because we've been disciplined in moving forward in a very focused manner, we've been able to achieve the goals that we've set out. And with respect to the official plan, we have, not only will we be doing the official plan, but we will be updating or creating an implementation zoning bylaw to go with that. We've allocated some of our best staff to that task, and they are getting ready as we speak to follow through with those key pieces of work that we're asking them to do. So, you know, I think we have to take a little bit of credit. The department has certainly given us a clear understanding of what they can achieve. We've agreed with that, and we've tasked the department to structure itself to achieve those goals, and they've done that. But we've also been disciplined enough not to send them in 17 different directions every 2 months, and which I think if we can stay the course with that discipline, we're going to get things done in a time when we expect them to be done. So I think it's important for us to say that publicly so that people understand why we're disciplined when we're dealing with new policy matters, and why we need the funding if it's required to move new things into the work plan. Sure you can.
I just wanted to say that another reason why it's, in building on what you were saying about the discipline, it's so much different in this term of council, and I want to applaud all the first-time councillors who are as first-time councillors. I'll tell you that the usual reaction would be to be running all over the place trying to be everything to everyone at the same time, and you're not doing that. And I can think of specifically 4 of the previous councillors that absolutely did this all the time and got us, and behind the scenes would be going to our planning staff and setting us off in different directions. And it caused us time, and I think it caused us to not have a sense of team. So I want to thank all of you that are in this room for your participation, because it's not usual that first-time councillors would have the ability to do that, and I think that you deserve to have the credit for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on that? Okay. So if not, can we move to the recommendation, which is in your report? That Plan Committee approve the Plan Growth Management Department's revised term of council work plan for matters, now it just, I love this new computer system as I'm reading the report. For matters within the Planning Committee's mandate as identified in Document 1. Is that carried? Carried. Okay. That's carried. Item number 7. I think that's Mr. Schmidt. And I'm going to ask Councillor Harder to take over the chair for this item number 7.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So item number 7 is a report that was brought forward as a result of a notice of motion that Chair Hume introduced at the last Planning Committee, and it was looking to expand the application of site plan control to Councillor Chernushenko's ward to deal with conversions of single-family semi-detached duplex houses to 3 or more dwelling units, very similar to an initiative that was approved by Council for Councillor Fleury's ward in Sandy Hill. And it was really trying to determine whether or not there was a means by which some additional review could be put into place with respect to conversions of these lower density residential forms to multiple unit residential uses. And generally speaking, this is occurring particularly in those 2 wards as a result of demand for increased student accommodation. So we've been taking a close look at that, and we are understanding that this has become a fairly timely issue in both of these areas, and having various discussions amongst staff on this particular issue, it's really an issue that really drives itself more with respect to the zoning bylaw as opposed to an item that really can be managed through an additional review process through site plan, because you're really not dealing with the issue. It in many ways can be considered a Band-Aid type of a solution, and looking at how you might be able to deal with some exterior elements of converted dwelling in terms of where parking is, how garbage is dealt with, to a certain extent exterior design, but it really comes down to the fundamental issue of a land use provision. As committee knows, the Planning Act does make provision for Council to enact interim control bylaws where there's an issue that's identified that, in the view of Council, requires a more detailed study to be undertaken to get an understanding in terms of how to deal with those issues with respect to a land use planning matter. And in this instance, this is a situation that staff, that the department feels does warrant the introduction of an interim control that would apply to portions of Councillor Chernushenko's ward and would apply to the Sandy Hill area. And the purpose of that would be to allow staff to take a closer look at the land use policies and the zoning provisions that deal with converted dwellings and how these are dealt with in the city, and see whether in fact there are things that could be done to better manage how these things might be occurring and the nature of impact that these may be having within some of these established communities. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, we've worked with staff, and we have prepared a motion, which I believe Councillor Hume is prepared to introduce to committee, that in effect will put in place an interim control, but first of all directs that staff undertake this study. It is timely that we are here today dealing with the department's work program for 2013. A component of that 2013 work program is phase 2 of the infill housing study. That will be dealing with some matters that we think are also related to the whole issue of expansions to residential buildings within established communities. That's something that Mr. McGlees and his team will be handling. And in terms of looking specifically at the converted dwelling issue, should Council, Committee and Council adopt a motion that Councillor Hume will introduce, will be an initiative that will be jointly undertaken under the leadership of Mr. McGlees' staff, but also involving staff and development review who have a much closer view to what is happening with respect to on-the-ground applications and initiatives and the challenges that we're dealing with. So, Madam Chair, with that as an overall introduction, I'll turn it over to Councillor Hume to take it further. Thank you.
Actually, I get to turn it over to Councillor Hume, so which I will. Councillor Hume.
Thank Thank you.
Chair Hume.
Mr. Smith, if I can just have I guess we need to know, Councillor Shinoshenko and Councillor Fleury brought forward a mechanism to try and manage, not to change, but to try and manage the issues through the site plan process. I mean, I think I need to clearly hear you say that's not working.
Mr. Chairman, or Councillor Hume, that is not working. That is a Band-Aid solution to deal with sort of some of the impacts associated with this, but it's not dealing with the fundamental issue that we need to deal with. It's a Band-Aid, and it doesn't really get at the heart of the issue.
And the scope of the problem is that what you get is a converted dwelling. The current provisions of the converted dwelling had the best of intentions, but in some areas are being used to change a single-family home into not a double or not some apartments, but in some apartments, but into vast multiples that the converted dwelling provision never really contemplated happening.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. What we're starting to see happen is, for example, single-family dwellings or detached dwellings, semi-detached dwellings being converted into buildings that contain 4 or more dwelling units, with each of those dwelling units having 4 bedrooms in them, basically accommodating up to 16-plus residents within what was originally a single-family dwelling. So fairly significant, and under the converted dwelling provisions in the zoning bylaw, you can in fact, and we're in fact seeing situations where the existing building has a certain size. I'm just going to throw out a number, for example, 1,000 square feet. An addition can be constructed to that dwelling that, for example, might be 2,000 square feet. So the actual built form, as of right under the zoning, allows for a much more significant built form within which you can actually introduce multiple dwelling units, and it's really starting to have an impact on some of these areas that are really more the lower density residential zones with this type of form of use going in. And it was never really contemplated to be that wide open under the converted dwelling provision.
And so the reason that you're recommending the imposition of an interim control bylaw is to go into those areas that you believe are experiencing or will experience more of this activity in the intervening months between the end of school and the beginning of the fall term, and in those areas. So it's not the citywide, it's in 2 specific areas. But the solution, when you come forward with the solution, will affect converted dwellings in the entire city.
That's correct. We're really focusing, I mean, the challenges really are in the 2 areas that we identified, with the councillors also identifying those as challenges in their communities. But you are correct. We are dealing with general provisions and definitions. So at the end of the day, the expectation is that whatever we might come back with would be amendments to the provisions of the zoning bylaw that are more citywide in application, not specific to those geographic areas. But the issue was we really needed to get an understanding of the challenges in those 2 areas to understand what are the nature of the provisions that we should be introducing.
So just two final questions. One of them is the imposition of an interim control bylaw freezes the property to its current use. So it wouldn't allow converted dwellings. I mean, it's a big hammer to use. So what I need to understand is the risk that should we not do this, that in the intervening time we're going to see a lot more of these dotted throughout these particular landscapes.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, we're really starting to see, I mean, for the amount of time I've been with the city, I've never seen this level of activity in that sector of housing.
And how long have you been with the city?
I've been with the city 27 some odd years.
Right.
So it's really becoming a fairly significant issue, and I think it clearly is something that we need to take stock of, need to take a closer look at, and figure out not to say you can't do things to accommodate sort of the different populations within those neighborhoods, but how can we make sure that we're not undermining some of the elements of stability within those communities that the official plan is also very much speaking to in terms of sort of the established lower profile residential areas of Ottawa.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And the last question then, so there's risk in making a statement that we're going to proceed and we're going to make some changes, but not take the action of imposing the interim control, that we would see people making applications, and once they've made an application, we have an obligation to process that application. So in the intervening time, if we don't do this, you believe we could see a number of applications to convert dwellings?
I believe that we will see more applications, and to the point that I think we're now starting to see some of the impacts of the ones we've been dealing with, to the extent that those impacts will be even more significantly magnified within those areas.
So, and the last question I'll have for you is when do we expect that, if we do this, to be able to have those zoning, to have the fix back before committee?
Mr. Chairman, I would see us coming back with recommendations flowing from our more in-depth analysis and looking into this within 6 months, if not earlier. So I'd say within 4 to 6 months that we will be back to committee with our recommendations.
So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Madam Chair, I'm, based on what Mr. Schmidt has said, I'm prepared to introduce, I guess it's a replacement motion, Mr. Mark, that replace the recommendation that we see in front of us with one that states, therefore be it resolved that planning committee, that the Planning Growth Management Department undertake a study in respect of the land use policies associated with the conversion of low-density residential uses to increase the number of dwelling units to 3 or more for the purposes of assessing the land use planning impact of such developments and establishing further zoning standards to help ensure their compatibility. And therefore, further be it resolved that Planning Committee recommend Council enact an interim control bylaw prohibiting the use converted dwelling as prohibiting the conversion of detached, linked detached, semi-detached, and duplex dwellings to a 3-unit dwelling, as these terms are defined within the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw 2008-250 within the areas shown on the attachments 1 and 2. And further be it resolved that the interim control bylaw not apply so as to prevent the issuance of a building permit for the development of a converted dwelling or 3-unit dwelling resulted from the conversion of a detached, linked detached, semi-detached, or duplex dwelling within the areas shown as 1 and 2, for which a completed application for building permit, committee of adjustment approval, or site plan control approval has been received by April 23, 2013.
Thank you. There we go. So thank you. You should all have that motion up in front of you if you want to access it. So thank you very much, Chair Hume. And I have a list of speakers, so you can speak to the motion, you can ask questions. Councillor Shirelli, please.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. My question relates to actually to Ryan Farm and City View, where we have had an ongoing issue for about 3 years regarding conversion to student housing. And the community is very apprehensive of the fact that there are single-family homes being physically modified to accommodate near rooming houses, if not illegal rooming houses. And so the question is, how can, if I were to write a motion right now, what would it say if I'm trying to get the effort that you're taking on right now to also include an examination of how we can preserve the character of those neighborhoods?
Madam Chair, we did take a look at the zoning in the Ryan Farm area, and that area is predominantly, and I'll have Mr. McCray correct me if I'm wrong, but R2 zoning, which does not permit converted dwellings. So the issues that are being faced in Councillor Cherny-Shanker and Councillor Fleury's area is not the issue that you're facing. We have not seen applications for conversions come in. So the issue that you're dealing with is, as we understand it, and like I said, as part of the work that we're going to be undertaking over the course of the next few months, should this motion carry under the interim control, we'd be taking a look at areas such as around Algonquin College and areas around La Cité. The thing is, is we haven't seen anything there that with respect to building permit applications. So it may be a situation in your area in terms of the owners of those properties renting them out to students. And I know I was a student at one time, and I can share examples of what we did back in the day. But
that's okay.
It's a different situation than where you're actually coming for a building permit and changing from a single dwelling unit to 4 or more dwelling units with multiple bedrooms in each of those dwelling units. I think the situation you're dealing with is more related to these properties being rented out to students and the different arrangements that might be undertaken with respect to how those students are being accommodated within those buildings.
Okay, without getting
in terms of a motion, I'm not sure, other than I can say that we will be looking at some of the peripheral issues as well and see if there might be something we can do. We may not be able to do anything.
Okay, without getting into your college days, which I'm sure were epic, the question or the concern we have in Ryan Farm City View is not so much people renting out to students. I don't think people really mind that all too much. It's the physical renovations and reconstruction of single-family homes to accommodate that, which then render those homes not really usable as single-family homes again. And so whether it be, 4 units instead of 6, doesn't really matter. And I know that in over half of those cases we are talking about illegal conversions or alleged illegal conversions where there are charges pending, but still I think we need to address that and address the perception that it's easy to get away with doing it.
I think I understand you, Councillor, and we can definitely take that as direction in terms of what we will be looking at. If there's specific, we can ask Ms. Gregoire whether or not she's got specific examples, applications, but I think you might have hit the nail on the head in terms of some of these things happening without going through proper processes to get the proper approvals that might be required. In the zoning in Ryan Park, it is R1, R2 zoning. It does allow for one accessory dwelling unit to be associated with a single detached dwelling. It also limits the number of roomers that could be accommodated within the single-family dwelling. So it is relatively low density. If there's things that are happening outside of what the zoning allows, clearly we are into zoning violations. And if people elect to do things without getting building permits, clearly you're into Building Code Act violations as well. So.
All right, so I won't write a motion because it may act more to constrict you than to help you. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Just so you all know, I have Councillor Deans next, Councillor Chernachenko, Councillor Hubley, and Councillor Fleury. Anyone else want to be on the list? No? Good. So, Councillor Deans?
Okay, just a couple of technical questions first about the Hume motion. It says by April 23rd. So meaning if you have not already submitted a site plan control application, you would, if you brought it in today, you would still be covered by this interim control bylaw. Is that right?
I'll ask Mr. Mark to also provide a comment, but the application would have to be complete. It would have to be crystallized. It can't just be submitting an application with a bunch of missing information. That's a placeholder. That's right.
Today.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yes, Madam Chair. The application, a fully complete application, would have to be in today. If Council should enact the interim control bylaw tomorrow, it will capture any applications made tomorrow or thereafter.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask about that, because if Council doesn't enact a bylaw until tomorrow, can you put a retroactive date today on it?
No. Ms. Gregoire's staff would actually have to have the application today, or and in respect of the lands within Councillor Fleury's ward that are already covered by site plan control, that would also have to be in to Mr. Moser's staff today.
Okay, thank you. I heard Councillor Hume say this is a hammer, and it probably is, but he was careful to ask if this was going to, catch too much. Like, it's not going to catch anyone who isn't actually taking their dwelling unit now and making it a multiple dwelling unit, correct?
Anyone who has applications with us right now, we're processing several. In Councillor Fleury's ward, there's building permit application in Councillor Chernyshenko's ward. Those will continue to be processed and brought to a conclusion. It's where we don't have a crystallized application having been submitted by the end of today. We will not, that use would no longer be permitted until we conclude the study and bring forward changes.
If I can add to that, Madam Chair, if I think I understand the Council's question, if there's a vacant lot and somebody's looking to erect a single within these areas, they'll be able to go ahead and do that.
Right. Or if someone just wanted to put, for example, a basement apartment in their home, that they would not be affected by this either. It would be a conversion to multiple dwelling units.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
In an R3 zone.
I think it goes beyond R3. I think it picks up R4 and R5 also, Madam Chair.
Mr. Chairman, wherever the zoning bylaw allows for the conversion of single-family semi-detached or duplex to multiple dwelling units, which would include R3, R4, and R5 zones, some of those zones, in fact, allow converted dwellings. Some of them allow for conversions to 3-unit dwellings. That's what's captured. That would be captured. Any other development initiative that might be pursued within those areas that don't fall into that category, such as the construction of a new apartment building, if it's a permitted use, can still continue to proceed.
Okay, so I just have to, I did check with city staff offline, but I just have to do it again because I thought it was just applicable to an R3. In the South Keys area, there would be no opportunity currently to convert single dwelling units to multiple dwelling units because combination of zoning, property type, and frontage. Is that correct?
I'll let Mr. McCrae or Mr. Herwire answer that. They were looking more at the details.
Okay. Yes, through the chair, we discussed this yesterday, and the majority of the area is an R1 or an R2 zone, which doesn't permit it. Most of the higher zones occupied by townhouses, you can't convert a townhouse. So there's very limited opportunity in the larger South Keys area where this could occur.
I'll just add to that. Also in an R3 zone, a rooming house converted is a conditional permitted use, but you have to be on an arterial or major collector, and it's also limited to 7 rooming units or 1 dwelling unit and 6 rooming units. That's specific to an R3 zone.
Okay. So I mean, to a certain extent, I feel like I have the same problem that Councillor Chernyshenko and Councillor Fleury have, but I think it's more akin to the issues that Councillor Shirelli has been talking about, because in the area that I represent, investors are coming in, purchasing single-family homes, and converting them to what I would call a rooming house. And it actually is changing the characteristic of that neighborhood, and it changes the parking. You end up having 8 parking spots on the street, and it affects the neighbors and the neighborhood. So I understand what you're doing here, and I certainly think this is a good motion that Councillor Hume has put forward. I'm not sure it goes quite far enough, because I do think that you need to look at this issue of illegal rooming houses. We've had bylaw out there multiple times, and bylaw can't get in. If somebody says, we're just friends living in a house together, and they can't find anything on the internet that has them individually renting rooms, then they can't prove that it's a rooming house, and it still has the same effect on the neighborhood. So I don't know how you address that issue, but I do think when you're taking a look at this that you really need to take a look at that and see if there isn't something you could do to address that issue, because it is really affecting communities, and investors are moving into those neighborhoods near schools, and they're buying up the properties, and they're changing the character of the neighborhoods.
Thank you, Councillor. And as I indicated, to Councillor Shirelli, I think we're prepared to sort of take that as direction to take a look at and see what there might be able to be done, if anything.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Chernyshenko.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm glad that Councillors Deans and Shirelli have raised that specific issue, because, in fact, we're facing that as well. But what we're doing today, what this is doing, is actually somewhat fundamentally different. So I wholeheartedly support this direction to deal with the rooming house by another name through technicalities, perhaps avoiding that definition. That's something that perhaps many of us face in different places. Closest to campuses, we tend to see more of it, and that is a problem. But just to put a real picture to what this motion today is intended to address, picture a single-family home on a street of primarily single-family homes with a shared driveway, going from being a home in which 5, 6, or really big family, maybe 7 people might be living in, to overnight, without any required notification to neighbors or the councillor, a building permit being able to be issued, as of right, for a quote conversion to 4 units of 4 or 5 rooms per unit. So you're jumping to 16 to maybe 20 residents on one lot with a shared driveway. That is so fundamentally different to what the neighborhood is and what all the neighbors thought it would more or less stay as. And that's what we're seeing, an explosion of applications. I'm aware of 2 of them, the 167 Aylmer and another one that already have their building permits. We can't do anything about that. But I'm also aware of people having their doors knocked on and getting offers. Curiosity, would you sell? So this is a building pressure and something really requires this hammer. We don't always want to use a hammer, but hammers have been invented because sometimes they're the right tool, and this is one here. The current situation, I don't think I need to persuade anyone here, but is not in anyone's interest. I look at how everyone's being hurt by it. It gives infill, the whole concept of infill, a bad name, because this really isn't infill. This isn't what we were trying to do. It's the bad apple, the bad application of infill. It gives the developers a bad name. The particular one associated with these ones, their name is hurt by it. If they had been directed to not be able to do this and do something at a smaller scale, maybe they wouldn't be encountering this as well. And to be blunt, it gives City Hall and us as councillors a bad name. Impotent at best, in cahoots with the developers, are some of the accusations we hear. We don't like to hear that. None of us believe that's true or want it to be the case. So when we don't have the tool to be able to stop something, then it just keeps going on, and we all say, oh, gee, it's too bad, I can't do anything about it. Well, we can, and I'm so glad that this more powerful a tool is being considered today, as opposed to the only one that I could find to start doing something which I knew was quite weak, but it was a start. So I'm glad to see that I believe we can pass today something that's much more effective. We need to return to a state of planned development that brings the benefits of intensification or density, the upside, without the downside of too much stress on the amenities, the capacity of different infrastructure, the built form, so fundamentally different to what the neighborhood has at the moment. All of those are things that we're going to be tackling now. And as has been mentioned, this isn't about students. It's not about apartments. We recognize, in our neighborhood near Carleton, it's had students, it's going to have students. Some of those students were once me and could be my children. But in what kind of dwellings are they being accommodated, and is it the right kind of scale? I'm actually in favor of greater diversity of dwelling in the neighborhood. A big problem is that we are seeing typically aging residents no longer able to stay in their own home, but not having anything they can move into. So I think it's a good thing that we have some kinds of conversions, that we have greater variety of building type coming into the neighborhood. But this is really about too much, wrong scale in one lot. I'm pleased to support this, and I hope you will as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Mark, I've had somebody ask me to be really clear, is there a need to clarify if the bylaw would be citywide?
Madam Chair, the answer to that is no. The bylaw is not citywide. The study is citywide. as Mr. Smith has pointed out, there are only certain locations where you can have converted dwellings in the first place. And a second very important concern is that once you act to enact an interim control bylaw, you cannot have one for any other purpose for a 3-year period. So there is a need to limit the interim control bylaw to where it's most necessary, so that if another concern arises in the next 3 years, Council still has that tool available.
Thank you. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I just want to clarify something. I heard Councillor Hume use the term fast multiples. I see in the bylaw before us, or the motion before us, the 3 units, conversion to 3 units, but I hear Mr. Smith and Councillor Sheroshenko talk about conversion to 4 units. What are we talking about here?
Again, I think this is in the context of the definitions that are in the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw defines a converted dwelling as a single-family semi-detached or duplex dwelling that's converted to 4 units or more. 4. So that's one terminology. But then there's another situation where you can have single-family semi-detached or duplexes converted to a 3-unit dwelling, which is not defined as a converted dwelling, but is still an issue because that is allowed to occur in the zones where converted dwellings may not be permitted, or if somebody is proposing that type of a conversion, it ends up being considered a 3-unit dwelling. So we needed to capture both of those. I think the intent was to really deal with conversions of predominantly 2-unit dwellings to multiple dwelling units of 3 units or more. So it's that full gambit, Madam Chair.
So for further clarity here, what you're experiencing is single-family homes with maybe 4 or 5 bedrooms being converted into units that have 16 or more bedrooms?
That's correct. We have been seeing those types of initiatives and applications being brought forward, yes.
Okay. And where I have some confusion with this is we talk about intensification, the need to intensify the neighborhoods through initiatives. Probably not what we're seeing here is what we envision, but in my own ward, I have one that's a single-family home that is being recommended to being converted to 24 condo units, and I believe the latest proposal brings it back down to 16, but it's still a lot more than the ratio we're talking about here, yet that's being promoted under the intensification.
And I think, Councillor, the key challenge here, and this is really what we need to focus on, and the direction in the motion is to undertake a study of land use planning implications associated with that use, and as was indicated, the expectation is that what we will be coming back with are modifications to the zoning bylaw that would have citywide application. So in certain instances, and I don't know the specifics of the application of the project in your ward, in certain situations it may in fact be very appropriate. In other situations we might end up creating conditions that really are not appropriate, and I think it really speaks to needing to understand sort of the various variables that fall under that type of conversion or use, and how can we better manage it, because right now clearly in certain areas the ability is not there to manage it in a meaningful way.
Okay, and I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Fleury.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. So everything was pretty much said, but just to give you an example of how we got to this hammer, if you will, it wasn't just, there is a process in place, and I think what we've done was early on, about a year ago, we've put a pilot project that looked at the area and said, hey, we're having issues around noise, around parking, around where people leave their garbage, where they park their bikes, and we thought that early on that this tool would allow us to, instead of just going through developers to go through building code process to capture these and better understand their impacts. Early on, we thought that would resolve the pressures. And what we realized with staff and with the various applications is that, you know what, the conversions are happening more and more aggressively. We've seen 16 bedrooms, 32 bedrooms. Specifically to Sandy Hill, the R4 zone allows for that fourth story to come in, or close to, and that creates problems for us. There's also all the setback issues. At grade amenity space, we've gotten into conflict with some of the infill procedures because the amenity space is described, but is not described at grade. So developers transfer the amenity space on the rooftop. Well, guess what? You have a bunch of students that have no amenity space. The only place they can go is on the roof. That creates problems. So we need to address, this is a zoning issue. I've heard a lot of the elements around, we also need to look at rooming house and the definition of what's a rooming house. And we also need to explain the difference between intensification and just this type of housing. These three are very separate. My question to staff, though, would be, how come it appears that when we were the old city of Ottawa, these mature neighborhoods would have had similar impacts? I mean, there is a student growth, but what did we have in the old city of Ottawa that allowed us to, if you will, quote-unquote, protect the neighborhoods from the type of student housing we're seeing today?
Madam Chair, I guess the zoning bylaw has changed over the years, and I don't have the specifics of the details, but my recollection is that in Old Ottawa, how we dealt with converted dwellings is different than how the bylaw today deals with converted dwellings. My recollection is that we had greater levels of provisions in the zoning bylaw that are no longer there today, and I think part of those things having been removed through the various iterations of the updates to the zoning bylaw was really, I think, trying to support and encourage sort of intensification within neighborhoods. And I think in this situation, what we might have ended up doing inadvertently is opening the door much wider than what we anticipated potential impacts might be. So I think it's really getting to the point of taking a look at it, and we've also done a very brief cursory review of how other jurisdictions and municipalities deal with converted dwellings. There's a number of tools that are available that we can take a look at that we will be exploring in the context of this study to try to figure out how to better manage how these things occur within communities, established communities. It's not to say that they're inappropriate uses, but I think when the elements of control that might have been in place in the past are removed, I think we've created a situation that we really need to take stock of and take a closer look at.
Thank you. On that, I'm wondering if this interim control bylaw also captures the secondary dwellings during the period of...
No, it would not. Secondary dwellings are permitted as of right throughout the city, so it does not capture that.
Okay. I'll just wrap it up on this. I mean, I think it's an ultimate tool, but we're revising it. Staff have been clear that it's a 6 months period. Hopefully we do see these zoning changes, and when Councillor Chernyshenko was speaking earlier around, we've seen 2-3 applications. I see 2-3 applications a week in Sandy Hill. So, I mean, it's not a Sandy Hill specific issue. I think because of the proximity to the university, their growth, and their lack of growth in student residence on campus, Sandy Hill has seen the impact, has lived the impacts, and it's gotten past the point of just, trying to capture it and better understand we need to act, and this is what this will do. So I'm quite optimistic and I'm favorable to it. We have to stop being behind the 8 ball, and we have to actually set a framework for which we protect these neighborhoods.
Good points. And, with the universal bus pass right now that we have at Ottawa U, for example, maybe you should be working with the university to see if they can acquire lands farther out along the transit corridor that they would be able to accommodate more of their students, because whether it's Carleton or Ottawa U, they're both like booming. That's good. And maybe also Councillor Fleury can have a copy of the former City of Ottawa's bylaw as it applies to this kind of, and just have a review of it and to see have a look at it, maybe Councillor Chernachenko as well. We have one more speaker, unless there's someone else, and then we'll go back to Councillor Hume for wrap-up. We have Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up, and I know this doesn't apply to the secondary dwelling unit part, but is this also going to look at where the amalgamations, when cities amalgamated, and you know the issue in my ward in regards to Bathgate, half of Bathgate at the time, when I first got into office, was the zoning was set for 11 meters, and somebody took advantage of that rule and built a 3-story home beside bungalows. On the other side of Bathgate, literally 50 meters up the road, in Councillor Clark's ward, it was already established at 8.5 meters. I've since brought down the height limit, but you can see where the amalgamation issues might come into play. I just want to see if this is going to be a part of that study.
Madam Chair, not specific to the issue that the motion speaks to, and I might ask, or I'll ask Mr. McLeese to provide some comments, but as per the work program that Council saw today, there's the Phase 2 of the Intensification Working Group Initiative for infill, and some of those issues, I believe, will be sort of looked at through the work that Mr. McLeese and his team will be doing. So, Alain, I'm not sure if you have anything further to add.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and through you, Madam Chair. We have just launched the process of the second infill study as we were directed by Planning Committee last year. As you'll recall, I think Ottawa is in the fortunate predicament of having the market actually fulfill the official plan. We are getting intensification. We are experiencing very significant market interest for residential opportunities inside the established city. And so with the experience that we've been accumulating with infill in established neighborhoods, we've had a first study that looked at issues of front yard and parking and projections, and that's the bylaw that was adopted last year, but this time last year. And through that consultation process, Madam Chair, we heard loud and clear from the community that we had to look at other attributes of built form, including building height, building mass, setbacks from the rear lot line, and setbacks from the side lot line. And those are going to be the focus of the study that my group is undertaking. So, as I said, we've just coincidentally just issued the launch of that study as an invitation to 200 community associations, including those in your ward, Councillor, and to the industry. And this is something that will take us to, again, the end of this year in terms of bringing back some recommendations. So it's an issue that, I guess, goes to not limiting intensification, but getting it right. It's not about putting the brakes on something that we say we want. It's taking the experience from what we've been seeing in the market and giving it further shape to really better reflect what we mean in the official plan by compatibility. Again, I mean, we have an official plan that speaks to intensification target areas, and I think it's always important to remember that there is a flip side, is that outside of target areas, the prime directive is compatibility. And so that's the focus of the second infill study that we've just launched.
Great. Thank you for that.
Thanks very much. And now we'll go back to Councillor Hume. Unless anyone else wanted to speak? I'm good, Madam. You're good? Chair. So thanks very much, everybody. Good conversation. On the Hume motion. Are we calling it a replacement motion?
Madam Chair, that's the basis upon which it was introduced. It doesn't technically have to be that way. You could carry both, but I understand that Councillor Hume introduced it as a replacement motion. And so will I need to ask as amended then? No, as a replacement motion, I think it's Section 20 or Section 21 of Procedure Bylaw doesn't require you to carry it as amended. So on the replacement motion from Councillor Hume, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, everybody.
If we could just make sure that this goes to council tomorrow.
So I need a motion, Councillor Hume, to waive the rules.
Goes to council tomorrow. So
on waiving the rules, all in favor? Carried. On sending it tomorrow? Carried. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I couldn't tell you. Sorry, I couldn't tell you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Harder, for that. If we could go to that's all of the regular items. Are there any notices of motion? No. Are there any inquiries? No. Okay. Any other business? Okay. We are adjourned until May the is it 14? May the 8th. May the 8th. We'll see everyone back here on May the 8th. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.